Human society is a great machine. When parts of it break down, the resulting defect disturbs all who make use of the vital component. The bigger the part, the greater the upheaval and cost of repair.
I've always wanted to write a novel, and it's one of those things that's been one of those lifetime goals that I thought I wasn't going to get to until I was much older. One of those post retirement projects, when I'm old and gray and I've got all the time in the world and I don't really have anything else to do. But for some reason, I just decided to do it now. I can't really remember what made me start writing. I think at the time I was reading a lot about post capitalism and seeing what was going on in the world. This was early 2019, or the summer of 2019 rather. So I saw how just our society was going, how things were changing, and I've always wanted to write kind of a novel that addressed those things. I also think that my involvement in social media at the time, I was doing a lot in the language language learning space because I did a previous podcast called the Tower of Babbling podcast, which is basically just me reading my book, The Tower of Babbling, that helps teach people languages. So I was getting involved in that community, and then I was kind of dipping my toe into the writing community as well. So once I saw like, hey, this is how you can write your novel in such and such time, they always have these motivational, if you write every day, if you do 500 words a day, things like this. So I just basically set the goal of writing. I think at the time it was like 500 words a day because I wasn't really working. It was summertime. So my teaching program, my school at the time was on break. Well, I had a class, but it wasn't much time at all. So that was another reason that got me writing last year. Also at that time, I was watching a lot of videos from Brandon Sanderson. He's a pretty well known science fiction fantasy novel writer. He's more fantasy. I haven't actually read any of his books, but he's an alumni of BYU, and I guess he does these class lectures every now and then to give back to his school. So he's gracious enough to post these videos online of him teaching basically the fundamentals of how to write a novel. When you're talking about character, you're talking about plot, when you talk about world building. I watched a lot of those videos last year, and that helped me provide a little bit of structure because I already knew how I wanted to structure the novel. I knew what I wanted to talk about, but obviously I had, well, not obviously, I had never written fiction before, at least not in long form. So that was a good kind of go by. So it was a mixture of what I was reading casually, what I was seeing in the world, and of course, just seeing the social media landscape and then getting the tools that I needed from the Sanderson videos that helped me start writing in May of 2019. My name is Keith Hayden, and I'm a teacher, author, podcaster, creator. Uh, I'm a lot of things. But looks like I'm going to be adding fiction author to that list, published fiction author very soon, or novelist, and that's pretty cool. When I think back to my first creative work that I ever did, I mean, outside of school, right? Outside of academic settings where you have to, draw or something. It was really when I was in high school. I was 17 at the time, and this game, well, it wasn't really a game, but at the time it was called RPG Maker 2000. It was on the PlayStation 1 gaming console. So it was pretty crude. I remember that this game took up hell of disk space. It would take like 2, 3, 4 memory cards just to play the game and be able to save it. The space was so small compared to today's standards. But anyway, so I created a little game called Mind Trap. And yeah, this game was just an RPG, and it was just kind of not based on my own life, but it was kind of a what if scenario. Like, what if I have two brothers, one younger and one older, and I was like, what if something bad, terrible happened to one of my brothers? So I kind of played that out using the RPG Maker. And I have to say, it didn't turn out too bad. I went back and played it just a few months ago, and I was like, okay, okay, I see you, 17-year-old Keith. I see you. I see you doing your thing. So I think that I just rediscovered that while I was in the process of writing this novel, while I was in the process of writing Sirius and Limnic, and that would just kind of reminded me, hey, you have done these types of things in the past, and you can do this. Because I think that's one of the hardest parts about writing a novel or writing fiction for the first time, is just believing that you can do it, believing that you can finish and that you can kind of come up with something coherent in that endeavor. And I think it really laid the foundation for a lot of other creative works, just having that creative mindset. Creativity, that's it's an interesting word because it's probably not something that comes to mind when you see me or you hear about my background. I'm a military veteran, 8 years active duty, U.S. Air Force, United States Air Force Academy graduate. So I think when I start talking about my background, creativity and imagination and novel writing certainly are not other words that come to mind when you think of that. I think people think about the stereotypes, the muscle bound, the grizzled, the gruff, rough around the edges military veteran. That's what people think when they think of veterans. They think about the horrors of war, but I don't think creativity is one of those things. But for me personally, I really fought hard even when I was in the military to maintain that sense of creativity that I had. Like just writing. I wrote a lot. I kept a journal for a long time, probably like 14, 15 years for a while. Yeah. So in that journal, I would just, I would, it was like a typical journal. I would write about my day and stuff that happened, but I would also kind of take chances. I would write in like third person or something. I'd write from another person that I knew's perspective, maybe, I'd kind of make up something. Sometimes I'd write poetry. Sometimes I'd write kind of these introspective entries about things that I learned or lessons learned or whatever I was going through at the time. So I was really practicing for my novel writing. That was really unknowingly. I had no idea that was practice for me to be able to write a novel. So yeah, I think combined when I was just always maintaining my creative spirit and just getting that technical writing practice, that was another reason that got me to do it. I mean, I feel like since I was young, I've always had a desire to create things. My brothers and I, we used to play with Legos a lot when I was a kid. So, we would create these elaborate cities and these elaborate just like worlds. The Lego people would have names. They'd have jobs. I remember my older brother, he made a database one time, and this was like early mid 90s, right? So yeah, he's already messing around with computers, but he made a database of like all their names and occupations and ages and stuff. It was really elaborate. So we would just play with those, and that just set the foundation. And I always played a lot of video games growing up, so I saw those types of worlds as well. So whether it's through writing, video, or song, or creating a podcast or whatever, I just feel like it's just kind of in my blood to create things. So that led to the book as well. Where did I grow up? I'm born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. That's where I grew up. A lot of my family still lives there. Most of my family still lives there. Like most of the people that I know that I'm close with, they still live in Texas. And, even though San Antonio is a really big city, it probably has like, I don't know, now like 2.5 million people or something at this recording. This is August of 2020. So yeah, it's a large city, but I don't remember it that way, and I don't think of it that way, honestly. I grew up on the southeast side of town, so if you've ever been to San Antonio, the southeast side of town is real kind of industrial. It's a lot of agriculture, and then I basically kind of straddled the city and the country. So I remember going to my grandma's house, going to church. That was definitely like kind of city type. She lives on MLK Drive down there. Well, she used to. Her house is still there. But yeah, but then my high school where I went to school, honestly, it's just a bunch. It was just a bunch of fields, and a lot of it hasn't changed. Anytime I go back home, it's pretty much the same. Like it's just the place seems to never change. But yeah, I think growing up down there, I had a really good childhood. I played outside, video games, things like that. Um, yeah, I had a great job. I had more or less it was a good childhood. And I feel like straddling both those worlds, I never felt like fully country. I never felt fully city. So that I feel like that opened me up to greater possibilities, and part of it's just who I am. I'm just kind of an explorer by nature. So I like languages, I like other cultures. I've definitely traveled a lot in during my life. So I think that set the stage early on to just like not being mentally confined to one place or one identity. So I can kind of take and choose what I like. So talking about the mentality, when when you decide to write a novel, it's a pretty big thing. Um, like a real novel, like not just I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of authors out there that there's a lot of people who just self-publish an indie and they'll write a small story and this, but I was like, no, this is like going to be a real hardcore story. So one of the things that I did in high school, I was a member of the Army Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I learned a lot of valuable leadership lessons in during that time. So I always, for some reason, I wanted to write a book about leadership a long time ago. I remember the first time thinking about it was when I was a cadet candidate at the Air Force Academy Prep School, because I had already had like 4 years of JRTC, and then I went through basic training, and then I would go through basic training again the next year after that, and I would just see the same kind of leadership lessons playing themselves out. So I don't know. I remember just like, man, I just want to write a book about leadership. I just want to, leadership, not just in the military sense, but just in general, like what it means to be a good leader, what a bad leader looks like. Um, yeah, things like that. So those leadership themes, I basically, I inserted that into Sirius and Limnic as well. Some of those leadership themes, one of the characters is kind of this hapless leader. He doesn't really choose to be a leader, but there it is. It's just kind of thrust on him. And some of you maybe some people have maybe been in that situation. I feel like a lot of people have been, where it's like you're the guy, you're the girl. All of a sudden, you're the man or the lady in charge, and you didn't choose it, but it chose you. So I really wanted to kind of explore what that looks like through one of my characters. One of the things that's special about this novel, Sirius and Limnic, is that it's a complete self-contained story, but at the same time, I know personally, because I'm the one who wrote it, that it can be looked at as kind of a chronicle of different stories. I have a hard time sticking with the same. I get bored when I'm writing, so I have a hard time sticking with the same kind of, it's a third person omniscient narrative, but it switches perspectives a lot between the characters, the narrator, and such. Um, and I feel like that keeps it fresh, and that makes it, I don't know, just that much more exciting. So it could be looked at that way. But I don't want to, I feel like I poured my heart and history into this book. My heart and history. And like, of course, I wrote it, so the characters are all parts of me in some way, but I've obviously, like a lot of authors do, I've kind of grabbed exemplars from people I know and kind of adapted the characters, but none are meant to be exactly the people that I know, because as a creator and an author, I feel like that's kind of limiting, because they probably wouldn't be involved in these types of fantastical situations. But I use those as my inspiration for some of the characters. The book is very much in line with how I view the world. So, like I've said, Sirius and Limnic, the characters have the perspective that I have sometimes, but it has the doubts that I have too about where we're going and what we're doing as a species and as a society. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my I guess I can talk a little bit about my teaching philosophy. So right now I'm currently a high school math teacher. I teach ninth grade math, and I feel like math. I've taught math at various levels and in various sites and different places, and I feel like math. A lot of kids struggle with it because there's no story connected to it. Well, there is a story. The story in most, at least in the US, the prevalent story is that math is hard and only selective people who have the math gene, if there ever was such a gene, can be good at it. You either have it or you don't, and most people don't have it. I feel like that's the prevalent viewpoint here in the US. And the story that's connected to math is kind of detrimental to kids learning math. So I feel like that's why a lot of kids aren't able to get it very well. Unlike English or history, to where I'm not saying those are inherently easier. I'm just saying that they are more inclined to tap into an emotional element. Like you can get emotionally attached to a Shakespeare story or some novel that you read, or history. Some historical events directly affect students' lineage and who they are as people. So obviously that's a little bit more interesting than integer operations or adding fractions or things like that, which is just facts. Facts are straight up facts are hard to assimilate. So when I was in school with math, I learned that way. I can just drill and do something over and over again until I get it right. But a lot of kids, it doesn't work that way. It just becomes painfully tedious. So I mentioned this educational philosophy because I feel like it should go without saying, but we get attached as humans to story. The more emotionally relevant it is to us, the more likely we're going to remember it. And I brought this mentality to my writing of this novel, to Sirius and Limnic. I mean, I felt like I had so many things to say about certain societal issues, but I didn't want to just. My first inclination was to write an essay, right? Just to publish it online and say, hey, here's the things that I think are messed up with society. Here's what the things I think are messed up with the human race and what we're doing. And here's how we get right. But then I was like, I'm just a random black dude. Nobody's going to read this. Why would anybody want to read that from somebody they don't know? So I feel like packaging it in a fictional tale, just like you have all these stories on Netflix or, all this media, movies, things like that. I feel like packaging it in that way is a better way. You get some salad dressing and lettuce and some croutons and some bacon bits on your salad instead of just giving them raw lettuce to eat. It doesn't taste very good. So, yeah, I feel like, I hope, I'm saying that now, that when readers finish Sirius and Limnic, that they, I hope they enjoy it and that they're entertained by the story and the characters, because I feel like truly it is a good story. I feel like it's just an interesting story. But the more importantly, it's the lessons that are in there. I'm a teacher, so even if I wasn't teaching math right now, I still like to teach things. And the lesson is what I want people to walk away with. If not just a lesson, it's just like the awareness of what's going on. Some of the issues are way off into the future. There are things that, we're not going to be trying to tackle until maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, even though that's not way off. But I mean, we got a lot of issues now that are happening. Some are very current issues. And that's the stuff that I'm like, man, we need to really pay attention to this stuff, because it's already affecting people, as we speak, as they listen to this or whatever. A little bit ambitious, I know, maybe, but very necessary.
For more information about Sirius and Limnic, visit keithhayden.net and subscribe, or follow at KH_author on Twitter.